Welcome to the Operation Paragon podcast, where we give you the conversations, tools, and tactics you need to be ready, willing, and able to confront life's challenges and win. I am your host, Gabriel Schickler, and today we are joined by Simple Men Blog to discuss how to find and build your mission, overcoming video game addictions, healthy relationships with money, why Christianity is the endpoint of masculine development, and much, much more. Before we get started, I just want to say that in a world of anonymous grifters, Simple Men Blog is the real deal. He practices what he preaches, as you'll hear, and he puts his mission first. And I've had the honor of seeing his page grow from pretty much nothing to where it is today, and I can attest that during that process, throughout that time, he's stuck to what he believes, he's demonstrated it, and the success that he is now seeing with his brand is very well deserved. So, with that being said, let's get into the show. As you guys heard, I am here with Simple Men Blog, who has been a pretty good inspiration and a decent friend in the time I've known him on social media for the past few years here. So it's just an honor to have him on to connect and dive a little bit more into his story and pick his brain a little bit. So the first thing that I really want to get into is if you can just bring people up to speed with the mission behind Simple Men Blog, and then a little bit, and you've shared pieces of this before, but for anyone in the audience that's not familiar, what got you started in it and really started on the self-improvement mindset, masculinity side of things.
Awesome, Gabe. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And yeah, that's quite a long story at this point. I'll try to be brief, but give you all the important details. So how the whole self-improvement thing started, I left my home country when I was 18 and went to study abroad, and found myself with a lot of time in my hands. As an 18-year-old man, well, initially that time, you can guess what it was spent on. Partying, chasing after women, and watching Netflix, TV, movies, whatever. And then after a little bit of this, I kind of felt guilty and was like, okay, I should be trying to at least to go to the gym or do something productive, right? I had always been like athletic in mind, like I had done sports in school and everything, but I had never truly like been consistent with a gym, right? Lifting weights and everything. So I joined a 24-hour gym, and I was hooked. Like I dropped everything else, and I became obsessed with the gym. And this was in the like early days of fitness YouTube, or when there were all these creators growing, and I was just obsessed with that. I watched videos and blogs of people going to the gym and bought all the supplements, and well, it was quite an interesting thing. That went on for like a year and a half, and it really worked. Like I became very, very strong, very knowledgeable, built my body, my physique. And the most important thing that happened was that it kind of kickstarted this fire to improving other areas, right? So I just remember I started ordering books from Amazon about self-improvement. My brother, who was I was studying in Germany, and my brother, who was also in Germany at the time, gave me, he's my older brother, by the way, and he's been like a huge role model for me and a guide in the entire journey of masculinity, or becoming like the man you're called to be. So he gave me the book The Way of Men by Jack Donovan. And that was the first thing that I read about masculinity. Like now I'm not the biggest fan of his, now with that I'm back to kind of having Christianity as my my faith and as my main thing in life. But yeah, that book really helped me at the time.
Yeah, and that's I haven't read it, but that's a very common recommendation for things starting in the space. So
absolutely, yeah, it's kind of the OG book of masculinity. It's one that many men. It was the first book that many men read about this, and it was the case for me as well. So yeah, I read that book, and I just started like really getting interested in developing myself, in being a better man, and learning about philosophy, so stoicism, learning about business. And I just got into this rabbit hole of self-improvement that also at the time was kind of related to more conservative views. This was back in 2016. So the world was not yet as divided as it is now,
Yeah.
but it was getting there. And it was kind of liberalism and leftism was starting to like get a stronghold.
Yeah.
So I just started also watching political commentators talking against this, and that just started shaping my whole worldview. As you can probably notice by this point, Christianity had not entered the picture properly. I was raised in a Catholic household, but I kind of rebelled a little bit against it and pursued things of the world. Happens to the best of us, I guess. But yeah, I'll go quickly over the next few parts of this. So after that, I decided I wanted to go back to my home country and finish my studies. I didn't really feel at home in Germany. And when I got here, well, I'm not there anymore. I realized that there was like what I had learned, because it was a year and a half of isolation where I was just reading, training, watching YouTube videos. I had learned so much, and I noticed in the people that were my peers at the time, going to university with me and everything, they really were missing this phase of development. They were still like just focused on, okay, I study and do the bare minimum so I can get drunk Thursday through Saturday.
Live for the moment, yeah.
Live for the moment, pursue casual sex all I can, and that's it, right? And at that point, I was like, okay, I want to share what I've learned, and that's when I started to write for the first time. I wrote a couple of books that I self-published about self-improvement and productivity while in college. Graduated from college, got a job, my first job, and while I was doing that, I decided to start the blog. Yeah, I'll stop there so we can kind of follow up.
Yeah.
Long enough. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And if you guys want to hear some about this more in detail, he does also have a couple articles, and I think a third one coming, that's a very detailed dive into your story on his Substack. So you can find that on his page. Of course, there'll be a link in the show notes and everything. I was, reading through that to prepare for this call and just kind of running through everything. And there were a few things that really jumped out at me that I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper on. One of the things that you touch on in that is you're talking about how you kind of like went for the red pill ideology side of things. I very similarly, it was really funny reading through this because I had a very close path to yours. I remembered specifically when I was, senior year of high school, maybe even junior year, getting ready for college. Like that was the phase where I just went like completely down the rabbit hole with this stuff. And one of the things that you said that I thought was really interesting, you said, was this vein? Yes. Do I regret it? No, because you view it as a necessary kind of stepping stone. And I think I've actually referenced this on a previous episode that I recorded last week with a different guest, where we were talking about Andy Frisella. Are you familiar with him at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that he talks about is how he thinks that having those material goals are important because it's like what gets your foot in the door and gives you that catalyst to get that ball rolling. And then once you have the stuff and you've achieved some level of success, you realize, hey, I need something that's, bigger than just me and my own ambitions to kind of get that going. So what I'm curious about is, from your perspective, do you think having that, let's say, self-centered view is a necessary part of the process, or is it just something that comes naturally to a lot of people?
That's a good question, and I don't think it's necessary for everyone. I do think that most young men who are hungry, want to achieve great things, and have this fire in them, end up starting there, right? But and one thing that is interesting is that eventually those men very often end up coming to Christianity and finding that meaning and that ultimate motivation not in the material success but in something higher, right? I do not think it's necessary, but I do think it's, and here, like, this is interesting because I was actually writing about this the other day, and you can kind of think of two different types of men, right? One type has this, like I said, this fire within them, this drive, this ambition, and then the other type is more passive and they just don't have that. I think that's in many cases something that you're just born with, this hunger to conquer, right? The first kind, the ones that actually do have this ambition, I think it's difficult for them to get to Christianity straight away, because what they see from the outside is that Christianity, what they think it offers and what the mainstream message of Christianity very often does offer, is a view that kind of waters down that fire, in the sense that it tells them they ought to be poor, passive, harmless,
Stay in line, follow the rules, check the
follow the
box.
rules,
Yeah.
check the boxes, but do it in a way that is not never too ambitious. That it kind of like they see it kind of going against achieving success in the world, right? So they see that and they're like, I don't want that. I actually want to achieve great things. So they enter through kind of a side door, which is this red pill movement, and then they end up turning to Christianity. At least that's what happened to me. Because if you're a man that isn't born with this hunger and you're just perfectly fine with being like passive, and I don't mean this disrespectfully or anything, but like a side character, then these men very often just go straight to Christianity, or how Christianity is presented right now, because it fits perfectly with what they are. And what's interesting, and what I was writing about the other day, is that true Christianity shouldn't water down that fire, but rather fuel it and do it for the right reasons, right? So that's just a little extra thing that it's very interesting, because I was precisely writing about this the other day.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So one of the things that's also kind of interesting about your story is, you said you started out college pretty much the exact same path as everyone else. You said, you were watching a lot of movies and just partying and just passing time, not really doing much of consequence. But you had that discontent, I guess, that built up over time until you got to the point where you said, I want to make something more of myself and more of my life. So if there is somebody listening right now that feels, called to do more, or they don't even know what that calling is, they just feel like discontented with living in that, more passive day by day state, what guidance would you give them to, get that ball rolling and actually find something that they can commit to?
Well, I think the first thing would be to tell them that it's not wrong to have that ambition, first of all, that it's a blessing from God, that it's a gift that they should treasure and use. And that just like it's a blessing, it's also a responsibility that they have to not waste it. Regarding kind of the motivation behind using that to achieve great things, I think it naturally initially will be maybe material things, right? Or things that are there to just fuel some kind of vanity or whatever. And while I don't think that's ideal, I think pursuing greatness because of that, or with that as a main motivator, is still better than never pursuing it, right?
Yeah.
Because I do think that in the process, and here's like where the actual advice comes from, is maybe right now that's your motivation, and if that's the case, then by all means pursue it, but keep your eyes and heart open during the process to realize when a higher motivation comes, right? Because I think it's easier for these men to eventually find the correct motivation and find like that overarching purpose that will serve as a guiding principle, by actually taking action and pursuing greatness, even if it's for the wrong reasons initially.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And another thing that fits in with this pretty well, you mentioned, I think this was when you just started working your first job out of college. You said you didn't have a whole lot of to do, so you spent a lot of time playing the Far Cry games specifically,
Yes.
kind of getting into that. It was a very offhand comment, and you moved past it very quickly. But I thought that it was very interesting because me personally, the games that I really like are Fallout 4 and Skyrim, which are, very similar. Like, you just have that addictive kind of feedback loop. But there have also been seasons in my life where I have felt more or less inclined to, pick those games up. And a big part of that is whether or not I have something that's a higher priority. Because, for example, when I was still in college before I dropped out a few semesters ago, I was mentoring freshmen. I was in basically a fraternity. I was involved with a swing dance club, the chapel choir for, Sunday mass. I was, taking classes, and I had a few other things going on. And I was just so busy, and all these things were so important to me that I didn't feel any inclination to pick these things up, even though I did have that habit built of kind of just, playing forever. So kind of, in keeping with somebody that's finding that motivation to get something going, do you have any advice for them of how they can find that thing, kind of like, you did with the Simple Men blog project and the other things you have going on, um, that's, going to get them excited enough where they can actually put aside the distractions because they're not as important to them as actually pursuing that goal?
And I mean, that's literally the question of life, I guess. And
Yeah.
I would say I don't have a definitive answer because I'm still building that myself.
Hmm.
But some advice there would be to just follow your natural curiosity. It usually leads you towards, or at least in general, in the right direction.
Hmm.
Um, of course, like, please bear in mind that when I say this, it doesn't mean like follow your temptations and your
Hmm.
desires, right? Because, oh, my natural inclination is to play video games, or my natural curiosity is to pursue women. Well, no,
Hmm.
that's not what I mean. I mean, like, for me, it was always, I kind of like to write. So I started like writing about things that I was interested in. For
Hmm.
some people, it's something else. And the one thing, and I was also writing about this the other day, is that what you need is a creative project in which you can feel some sort of progress to really kind of offset maybe the withdrawal symptoms of quitting video games. So
Mm.
on a side note, I've been a big video game player, also Skyrim. I played a lot of FIFA. Um, I was pretty much addicted, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then, similarly to you, simply as I started to see that progress in the real world instead of
Hmm.
on the screen, I just naturally had less time, and it was more fun to watch my subscribers grow, my
Hmm.
followers grow, than watching my character evolve in
Yeah.
whatever game I was playing, right?
Yeah, that's so
Um,
true. Because part of the danger of video games is you have that feedback loop and you feel like you're, improving on something and getting better. So I can see
yeah,
what you're saying. It's definitely important to mimic that in real life so that you have a sense of progress and achievement, and you don't need that as
exactly,
your source of fulfillment or accomplishment.
exactly. And that just goes to show you how much men need to see growth,
Hmm.
as a main thing in their lives. Like, I have always said that in the very pursuit of growth, there's purpose. So, going back to your earlier question
Mm.
about kind of where to find that, I
Hmm.
think you find that in looking to grow. And you probably already know in which aspects you need to grow, right? If your social skills are lacking, then you start there. If your fitness is lacking, then you start there. If you're intellectually not where you want to be, then you start reading, right? If you're
Hmm.
spiritually not where you want to be, then you start praying and learning about your religion, which I'm guessing for most of you will be Christianity. But um, yeah, it's just interesting that like, one of your deepest desires, or like drives as a man, is to see that growth and to see it manifest.
Hmm.
And when you're seeing it on a screen constantly, then you just get hooked on that. But when you start seeing it in your real life, then you get even more hooked on that. So you just need to
Hmm.
replace the false upward curve on the screen with a real one, in which you can look back and see, like, okay, yeah, I was here a year ago and now I'm here, and you can actually
Hmm.
track and measure that progress, and that will be your best antidote against those distractions such as video games or anything else.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's really powerful. And kind of on this subject of, personal growth, pursuing that next level, you were, for the entire time you were studying abroad, all 18 months, you were just dialed in, completely monk mode. You didn't have a lot of outside contacts. Like you said, you were just doing the work for school, going to the gym, and then consuming self-improvement content. So
Yeah.
given your experience with that, and also that you said, a man does need friends, and you need that network, when do you believe that it's appropriate for a man to kind of retreat into himself and focus just like, on the 3 feet around him and just himself exclusively? And then how do you balance that with, having a good network, having friends that are going to push you to the next level, keep you accountable, help you set better goals and things like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're asking the good questions,
Thank
and
you.
difficult ones. So I um I think the regarding the first question, um, when do I think it's time to kind of do the two things? So if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you need to change something, then I think that's when it's time to retreat and like regroup, spend
Hmm.
some time with God, spend some time working for yourself, in introspection. And I see that as kind of a way of kickstarting a new a new version or a new phase of you, right?
Hmm.
So I think whenever you feel like, okay, I'm again kind of a bit lost. I'm maybe pursuing the wrong things. I don't feel as satisfied in what I'm doing. Then it might be time to just shut off all distractions for a bit. And I think there's not one size fits all answer for this. It can be a week, it can be a month, it can be more than that. And to shut off all distractions and then just focus on that. However, I after spending because it was 18 months, of course I saw people, right? But like very often it was just a week would go by and I wouldn't talk to anyone, or just, just
Wow.
the people at the grocery store. And so it was a bit extreme.
Hmm.
And while I don't regret it, I definitely don't recommend it. I think it did get to me after some time, and it's pretty dangerous to let your social skills well become rusty, basically.
Hmm.
So I think the least time you can spend in this sort of monk mode, extreme monk mode, where you're just focusing on yourself and not really putting any effort into your social life, the better.
Hmm.
But I do think it's necessary when what is happening, like I mentioned, like when you feel like you're stuck or whatever, then it might be necessary to just take a break and focus on yourself so you can
Hmm.
start again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good stuff. And so if we switch gears a little bit and look more at specifically the work that you've done with the page, have you missed a single day of posting since you started?
Yeah, I have. So
Okay.
when I say I have posted daily, it's a bit of an exaggeration. In case you can, in fact, you can look at the amount of posts that I have published, and the math just doesn't
It's
check
a
out for
lot.
daily.
Hmm.
So I've posted, I would say, 725, and that's been in like 2.5 years. So yeah, I've missed a bunch of days.
Okay.
I know initially, for the first couple of months, I didn't miss a single day.
Hmm.
Um, but what I have never done is taken a break from the
Hmm.
page. So if I have missed a day, it's A, because I just didn't publish anything, but I never like did it consciously, or
Hmm.
or like quit even for a few days. Um, so I think that's what I mean with being there daily. Like I've been working on my page daily, and sometimes working on the page is just
Hmm.
taking on a more passive role and answering DMs or posting a story or whatever. So yeah, not daily
Hmm.
posting, but daily work on the page.
Daily work.
Uh,
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's probably the most impressive thing with the brand, because you see this with a lot of pages in this space. Somebody will start a brand and they're fired up and they want to get it going. Then they go for a month or two and then they, ultimately lose interest and it just kind of fizzles out. But I think the fact that you've been able to get to, at this point past 100K in just a couple years with, just having that consistent effort, putting that in on your end. I wanted to highlight for everybody because it's really a testament to, just like staying focused with what you're doing, and then not letting it get to you if you're, not seeing the results you want. Like that screenshot that I sent you where you were under 4K.
yeah,
I think you'd had the page up for about like several months, if not a year at
a
that
year.
point. And then it just slowly kind of built up to, where it is now.
Yeah,
Where, I mean, you've picked up, another 1,000 followers in the past like week or something like that at most. Um, yeah, so there is an American philosopher. His name is Eric Hoffer. Are you familiar with him at all?
I'm not.
No, okay.
No.
Yeah, he's not terribly well known. And not very recent either. I think he died toward the beginning of the 1900s or something. But anyway, he has this really interesting quote that I wanted to present to you. He says, "Every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket." And I think we can see this pretty obviously with we can call it kind of the trad movement in general, where a lot of these pages will start up and they're well intentioned, but either they get outperformed by somebody that's trying to build a business off of it and just sell their t-shirts or whatever it is they're doing, or that original like kind of zeal will again die out, and then they'll just focus purely on the business side. The reason I wanted to ask about this is because you've had your own kind of journey in that respect, where you started out really going hot, and then I guess this was several months ago before you started the 2.0 launch, but things kind of like, at least from the outside perspective, it seemed like things were kind of dying down with the page and everything like that. So given that experience where you had that initial commitment kind of lulled in the middle, and correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, yeah, so that's what it appeared to be. And then now you're back, you're posting content you enjoy, you just released that book that I want to touch on a little bit later, and all these other things. So what do you do to maintain that original vision and not let the prospect of making money kind of distract you from the actual mission? Because I feel like that happens with a lot of people.
Excellent question. I love it. And it's exactly as you said, like I started completely honest, just wanting to post good advice for men. That was it. It was no business. And then of course, as the page started to grow, then I saw the opportunity, I took it. I never sold anything I didn't believe in. I want to make that very clear. Like all my programs, I still believe in them. But all of a sudden, the main goal of the page was to make money, which wasn't the main goal at the beginning. And with that, I became a bit disenchanted with it. And as you say, it started to kind of die down a little bit. It was just repetitive. I wasn't putting my heart into it. And what's very interesting is that the audience and the people that follow and read what you post, they can tell if like you can write the exact same words, but if your heart's in it, it will come out different, and it will like have a different impact. So yeah, how do I balance that, and what am I doing to not let that kind of distract me or divert me from the actual purpose of the page? And honestly, I'm praying for purity of intention, and this is something that I also I wrote an article about recently, and that is I'm just praying that whatever I do it for the right reasons, and that whatever I write, I actually write with the goal in mind of helping people, of bringing people closer to God, of offering valuable advice. And absolutely, I do still want to make this a business, like I still have a premium tier for the Substack and everything. But the main thing is this praying for purity of intention. Well, of course, prayer works. And secondly, it keeps you, what's the word? It makes you aware of why it is you're doing things. And so I think that would be my best advice, to keep that in mind, and always pray for purity of intention in everything that you do.
Yeah, amazing. And going along with that, watching your journey over the past couple of years, you by no means live a public life, but it is pretty clear that you're much better off financially than you were before. You've tried a bunch of different business models. You did the personal training. You worked at that startup. You had your own publishing company at some point, I believe, and then a couple other things. So kind of with the context of keeping your faith and your mission as the central purpose, can you give just me and the audience a little bit of insight into your relationship with money, how you view it, and then what you think the proper approach is versus the mistakes that either you've made or you see other people make?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I'll admit that many times I have had making money as the main goal of my endeavors. course, never did anything unethical, just to make that clear.
Yeah.
Never started an OnlyFans agency or anything like that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. No, I never like that. It was
Yeah.
always very, very, very cool stuff.
Mhm.
But honestly, I think you need to see, well, first of all, you need to really understand that money is very abundant, that money is, and hey, I'm no financial guru. Like I'm
Mhm.
a long ways away from where I want to be. I'm decently off financially for my age. I'm
Yeah.
doing well, but
How you're 27?
I'm 27. Yeah.
27. Yeah, so for the listeners, he is 27, I am 22. We are not claiming to be the experts. We are
Yeah,
talking about
exactly.
what has
Not at
worked
all.
for him. What has worked
Not
for
at all.
him, what's serving him well, and hopefully
Yeah.
learning from it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And also, and I think this message is not about how to make more money, but rather, like you said,
Mhm.
the relationship that you should have with it. And I think the main reason, and this goes back to kind of the main motivation for doing stuff. Um, at this point, I just feel like the more money I have, the more I can help,
Mhm.
the more generous I can be, and I found that also gives me a very, very strong motivation to earn more, right?
Mhm.
So I think having that as the main motivation, as opposed to vanity, as opposed to buying things that will stroke your
Mhm.
ego, instantly makes it so that you have a healthy relationship with it, because you see it as an enabler, as a tool,
Mhm.
right? As a tool to help you develop into an even better man.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful. And in keeping with that is the idea that, if you're unhappy when you're poor, you won't be happy when you're rich either, because it's not necessarily how much you have in the moment, but like you're saying, having the belief that it's out there, that you'll be able to help more people, and keeping that, I guess, abundance mindset, if you will, with
Yeah.
respect to it. So that's really good stuff. And then, one thing that you've been very clear about throughout this entire call so far, and then also recently on the page, is the importance of, Christianity and your faith to you.
Yeah.
It's always been present with the Simple Men blog project, but recently you've specifically and very deliberately made that more clear. Why is that so important to either men's movements in general or Simple Men blog specifically?
Yeah. So I'm Catholic. Um,
Yeah.
One thing that I can that I can say is that I'm not theoretically very knowledgeable about
Mm-hmm.
the different denominations. I'll be fully honest with that. And at this point, like I've seen a lot of division between denominations, and I just think it's completely pointless, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a clear enemy, um, that we all have, that we're all facing. There are clear doctrines that go against Christianity, and at the end of the day, we're all followers of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And if we agree on the 99%, then at this point, it's not the right time to be discussing or creating division because of the 1%. So just as a side note, which is why I talk about Christianity in general, not Catholicism, not Orthodox Christianity, but Christianity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Followers of Christ. Um, yeah. Went a little bit off track there, but yeah, going back to what you asked. So I was a bit disenchanted with the way the blog was going, and
Mm.
one thing that did happen was, as I started to write more and more about this, about masculinity, about how to properly be a good man, I started to notice that the things that I was saying were just perfectly in line with Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
kind of almost involuntarily, right? And it just shone on me the that the truth had been there all along,
Mm-hmm.
and my philosophy, or whatever I was trying to teach or preach to young men, was just the values of Christianity. I just wasn't calling it that.
Mm-hmm.
um, and that just kind of, I don't know, that instantly made me more of a believer. I had always been a man
Mm-hmm.
of faith, but never really practiced it. And when I noticed it, it was like, okay, this cannot be a coincidence.
Yeah.
um, and also, at that point, I started to notice the obvious flaws in red pill doctrine, the problems with it, the fact that it leads you to seek very dark materialism,
Mm-hmm.
um, the whole sexual immorality push for men, specifically saying that it's only women that should be like chaste or keep
Mm-hmm.
like or be sexually moral, and that men had all the right to go around sleeping
Yeah.
around with a bunch of women, So I just started to see a lot of things in this manosphere going against the what I actually thought meant to be a good man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, these things I had believed also for a while. And like if you heard from my story, I also pursued those in a moment. But I just realized like, okay, the only antidote for this and the only righteous path for a man so as not to fall into these pitfalls of the red pill doctrine is to follow Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
It is to actually have the 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 proper role model, which is Jesus, and not these gurus who are humans and who
Mm-hmm.
are flawed. Not to follow. And I'll drop some names, not because I dislike them in general, but just because they're those that people usually follow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Tate, like Jordan Peterson, even. These are men who have
Mm-hmm.
good things about them, bad things about them. But what you end up seeing when you don't have Jesus at the center is that these become your idols and these become your gods.
Mm.
And so I also noticed that, and I was like, okay, no, the message I should be preaching needs to be a Christian message, because otherwise I will just give them, or like, yeah, give the men that follow me the freedom to fall for idolatry,
Mm-hmm.
because I'll be teaching them to be strong men, but I won't be outright speaking against all the things that red pill doctrine has taught them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when a bit on a tangent there, sorry.
No, no, that was great. You're really reminding me of one of the Psalms. I forget which one, but there's a line where it says, it's vain to place your hope in men or princes. God takes their breath, they return to dust. Their plans that day come to nothing. So just, I think that was Psalms. Might have been Proverbs. I don't remember. But anyway, the point is, yeah, no, that's definitely very true to kind of keep that more, I guess, like eternal perspective. I was actually having a fascinating conversation last week on another show I did with a fellow who is I don't know exactly what he believes, but he's kind of with that like solar pagan movement, that kind
Mhm.
of thing. And he is a huge Homer nerd, and he was telling me about how, uh, in his opinion, Jesus Christ is the epitome of the Greek ideal like hero, not Achilles, not Odysseus, but
Interesting.
Christ, which is, I don't remember if this was on the show or afterward, and I wish I'd had more time to kind of pick his brain on that and go into the details of it. But it was just, it's so interesting because when you think about the Greek ideals of masculinity, you think about like storming a city, not
Yeah.
necessarily, you know, giving your life. But yeah, it's fascinating stuff, man. Awesome. So like I said earlier, I also do want to touch a little bit on this, book that you just released. Tell us a little bit about what it's about, why you wrote it in the first place, and really what the, mission is behind it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting that you asked, because I have another one coming soon, and it's this one is the next one is you're going to love it, I guarantee. But for this one, honestly, it's a collection of writings, in from various different topics, written in the first person, kind of diving deep into the highs, the lows of day-to-day life as a man in the
Mm-hmm.
21st century. Um, it starts a bit dark, I kind of split it in four sections,
Mm-hmm.
um, each one kind of reflecting a different season. So the first one is winter, and I just gather there all the writings that I wrote when I was kind of feeling down, feeling sad,
Mm.
feeling beaten down, whatever. But then it starts to pick up, and kind of the last one is summer, and summer is the one where I just dump all the motivation and all the good stuff in the book. So it's really not that well structured. I'll be completely honest with
Mm-hmm.
it, because I never meant for this book to be a bestseller, for it to be commercial. I just wanted to publish something physical, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to kind of kickstart the journey of publishing my own books, or publishing books in general, with something that was quality. I don't know if you've read, for example, Harassment Architecture.
I have not, but I am very familiar.
Okay, yeah, it's a super interesting book, and if you ask me what it's about, I like it's not that easy to describe. You know, it's like collections like a collection of short stories that detail what the author goes through daily and what he thinks about, and it kind of ends up forming some sort of philosophy for life as a man. That's what I would say about mine as well. Maybe that was probably not the best pitch, but it's not a problem because I know that. And even though the book, I love the Rivers of Fire. I think it's a great book, and the feedback has been amazing. But this next one, that one, I'll be able to go deep into detail and tell you exactly what it is, and I think you'll be very, very, very much a fan of it.
Awesome. Yeah, and you guys, of course, can find that book on his page and Substack and everything like that. And I guess do you have an official launch date for that second one yet?
Not yet, but yeah, it'll be soon, in a
Okay.
few weeks or a month or so, or 2 months max.
Awesome, brother. Yeah, and so to, I guess, start kind of tying things up here, I want to ask a couple, I'd say, more general questions. The first is, what is a good man to you? Because we've referenced that a few times throughout the show here, but we haven't actually defined what it means to you.
Asking the heavy questions.
Yes, sir.
At this point, I think a good man is a man that honestly and genuinely tries to do his best to perform his role as a man, as assigned by God. That's it. Which is very open, but I think that's it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And to kind of dig into that a little bit deeper with the question of finding meaning, and from a Catholic perspective, right, we would understand that as, your vocation, the mission that God made you to fulfill. But regardless, even if you don't believe that, you necessarily must hold that there is some sort of meaning in life, or there isn't. I much prefer the first the first position.
Same.
To what extent do you think that purpose is something that is, maybe I should qualify this a little bit before I ask that question. So if you think about your life as like just a straight line, right? So you've got your timeline, and then you've got all these different branching paths of the different routes you could potentially take. We would say, again, from the Catholic perspective, there are three, we'll call them capital V vocations, so the state and life vocation. So this would be either you become some kind of consecrated single person, you become a religious, so this would be a priest, a monk, a nun, something like that, or you get married, and that's a permanent change to the state of your soul. So in the case of religious, that mark is on your soul into eternity, can never be removed. In the case of marriage, that is a bond that is created until one or both of you die, and nothing else can get rid of that. So if you're thinking about the branching timelines here, there are some decisions that make it impossible for you to get back to that original timeline if you weren't supposed to go that way, quote unquote. So my question is, to what extent do you think we have things that we are destined to do or made to do? And to what extent is it up to us to decide on that purpose and pursue it? So an example would be with the Simple Men blog project. You might not necessarily have had a specific vocation to start an Instagram page, but that's part of a deeper calling that you feel, and that's just how you chose to express it. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And again, very good question, very, very deep question. And I would like to actually hear your thoughts on this. But I'll try my best to give some sort of answer. I think what you said is true. Like I think the vocation or those decisions that are, I wouldn't say predestined, but that are part of that mission that God sets on you. Those are usually those big ones. Like, okay, am I getting married, or am I doing something like being a consecrated man? Am I choosing this life path, or will I start a business or will I do something
Mm-hmm.
else? Will I live here or will I live there? Those big decisions are pieces, I think, or can somehow affect that life path that you mentioned. But then
Mm-hmm.
within that, all the I think all the little things that you do on a day-to-day basis that relate to that, that's that's up to you. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think those are things that necessarily, um like, God won't tell you your mission is to start an Instagram page, grow it to
Mm-hmm.
X amount, but he'll tell you you have a voice that has influence, or that can have influence,
Mm-hmm.
and you're called to share it, right? And
Yeah.
then that's the mission. Everything that
Mm-hmm.
happens within that mission, I would say, is acceptable. So I don't think it's like a super clear destiny path, like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe if I wasn't writing, maybe I could have been, I don't know, a speaker, and then that would be another way of
Mm-hmm.
completing the mission. So within what God calls you to be, there are multiple ways of doing it properly, and multiple variations and paths that you
Mm-hmm.
could take. I don't know
Yeah.
if that makes sense, but I would
No,
like to
that
hear your
that makes a
your
lot of
answer
sense.
to the same
Yeah.
question.
Well, first, I just want to highlight one of the things that you said, but just to re-emphasize this, because I recently realized that I was living in a state of waiting for some sign or something magical to happen and change my state, and then that would be the inflection point, and I would have permission to live in a different way and start going to the next level. Um, that's not to say that there aren't instances where God will give people a very clear and distinct call. But if you're relying on that to find direction in your life, you will probably be disappointed, because those things are the exception to the rule, not the norm. Um, with respect to people's individual callings, I've been thinking about this a lot. And I mean, I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of this recently as well, because in the grand scheme of things, we are basically infants, like as far as what you
Yeah.
accomplish in life. So, um, one of the one of the things that I've been wrestling with a lot recently is just acknowledging the fact that I could live my entire lifetime, so another 22 years, or even another 44 years over again before I find that one thing that I'm really meant to do. And so having that perspective of being willing to just be patient and trust the process and be where I'm meant to be, and just trust that it's oriented towards something that's a greater calling at the end of the day. But I also heard something, I think it was from Tony Robbins relatively recently, where he said to free yourself of the delusion that there is a single purpose. And this is something that I think a lot of I can't speak to Christian circles in general, but I think in Catholicism specifically, because we have the idea that there is a clearly defined role you can fulfill, with, again, being married or the priesthood or whatever, that somehow once you get to that point, then like it's done, it's over. And that sets up a really unhealthy paradigm, because on the first hand, if you do, let's say, choose correctly, let's assume you do what you're meant to do, um, then that means you've achieved your purpose and you're just kind of running out the clock on the rest of life. And then on the other hand, if you make the what could be considered the wrong decision, then is that somehow a mark on your character or something. So the way I see it is that we have desires and inclinations for one of two reasons. Either it's a calling from the higher self that is a clue or a hint to what we are meant to do, or it's a calling from the lower self, which we would understand to be that human state of original sin after the fall in the garden. um, and so the role of the individual is to develop wisdom and prudence and their just general understanding, and try to figure out, is this something that is calling me to a higher standard, or is it something that is trying to drag me down? And in a lot of cases, those aren't even necessarily temptations or things we get from the devil. It's just things that our environment, our parents, our friends shove on us, because they try to give us these labels and fit us into these boxes, correctly or incorrectly. But at the end of the day, they're still expecting you to live up to a certain standard, that they've kind of devised in your mind. And if you try to do something that's out of that frame, then they tend to react negatively, not because they have anything against you or they hate you or anything like that. It's just because you're doing things that don't match up with their perception of you, and they can't comprehend that. Right. So that's a very long way of saying that I think we need to give ourselves more credit in discovering our own callings, because all things, if you look at just how actions, like any action, any choice, any thought, it if you're going to believe that there is a God that's holding things in existence, the breath in your lungs, like the actual oxygen particles, the brain function to inhale, just the fact that the matter exists, the fact that you can think, all of these things start with God, but they're tools that he gives us. And then with our free will, we have to then cooperate with that. And if we cooperate with it, then it ultimately comes back to him, because it's, to his glory. And if it doesn't, then that's when you start to go down, the wrong path. And that's where your conscience kicks in, because that something's screwed up, even if you can't necessarily define it. So that was, pretty long-winded, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to touch on one thing that you meant, or two things that you mentioned that I think were very interesting. And one is, you mentioned you were waiting kind of for that inspiration to come, right, out of nowhere. And I think that's a state that many men are in, are like, God, give me a sign of what I'm supposed to do, right? But if you think about, like, God doesn't, like I said, he doesn't give you the all the path, but he shows you maybe the next meter, or the next 2 meters. And then as you start walking, the path starts appearing. But the whole path doesn't show up at once.
Dude, that is so powerful, because what I just realized from what you're saying, you don't need permission from God to do what you're meant to do, because he's already designed you to do, like, he's already given you permission to follow that path.
Yeah.
The only other person that needs to give you permission is yourself.
Exactly.
So you don't need anyone else. It literally just allow yourself to follow that path that you're meant to be on, and it'll work out.
Yeah.
You had a second thing.
No, yeah, that the path appears as you start walking it. That God cannot nudge you in the right direction if you're standing still. He can only nudge you and kind of direct you if you're already going somewhere, if you're already walking, if you're moving, So
God can't drive a parked car. Yeah.
Exactly. You have to make it easy for him and help him out a little bit, like, okay, God, direct me where I should go. But he'll do that when you start trying, when you start actually taking action, when you start taking steps towards that. And what's interesting is I am 100% sure that every single man, however lost they think they are, they know of at least one thing that they can do to improve their lives. Maybe that's what God's showing you. Like, start there. And then for many, that's go to the gym, right?
Yeah.
Quit porn, whatever. Start there. And then there'll be a next thing and the next thing. And
and in my own life, the times that I felt lost, or I felt like I don't know what's going on, I've realized it's because I'm neglecting the basics. So I'm not making time for daily prayer. I'm not eating well. I'm not working out regularly. I'm not trying to learn new things or improve myself. So, like, if you feel lost and you say, like, I genuinely don't know what to do, just focus on being the best person that you can in that exact moment, because there are definitely things that you could improve on. And then, once you level up, then the next step will become more apparent, like you're saying.
And that's what I said earlier. Like, there's purpose in just trying to be better. And that's the same as starting to walk the path kind of blindly, but you do know how to get better. You do know of a couple of things that you could do right now to improve your life. So start there, and you'll see, and I promise you that if you stay and stick to it long enough, you'll start to see, and not only see, but also be able to build that purpose and build that path and work together hand in hand with God, in walking it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say about
and
that.
the page itself is evidence for that, because I mean, you're only less than 3 years into it. So I'm really interested to see where the brand is in 10 or 20 years, if you still have it going, because at that point, like we said, toward the beginning, it's just compounding and staying consistent. And amazing stuff, brother.
You mentioned at the beginning, like, so many pages that start and then they grow to 500 followers and then they stop. It's like, You grew to 500. What makes you think you cannot grow to 1,000 and then 10,000? And it's just a matter of time, you know? Oh, well, one caveat there is that, and I think this is just good advice for business in general, is you have to be able to iterate and to realize when something is not working and try something different, which is what I just did, you know, with the new rebrand and everything. But it's exactly that. It's like, okay, if I don't ever stop doing this, because I have the ability of never stopping, how many followers will I have? How many, I don't know, how many books published? How much people will I know? How many friends will I make? And how many people will I be able to impact? So yeah, it's just staying in there. Keep walking.
Powerful stuff, brother. Awesome. Well, we're getting to the end of our time here. So do you have any closing comments or anything else that you want to bring up before we end it?
No, nothing more on my end. Just thank you for being a great host. I really love the questions. I
Thank you.
I wasn't prepared for some of them. I think some of them were pretty difficult, but I did my best to answer. And yeah, no, I hope to. Yeah.
It's been great to have you, brother. So everyone, this is Simple Men Vlog. You can find him on Instagram. His Substack is linked. He has a ton of stuff on the feed in his Instagram profile. And then a lot of longer form articles, both on Substack, and he does have an email list that I personally really enjoy. I get a lot out of these. So you can sign up for that if you're interested. Keep an eye out for the book drops. Are you still active on Twitter or any other platforms? Or is it...
I am.
Okay.
I have deprioritized it a little bit, but I am active. So you can find me on Twitter as well.
Yeah. And are there any other platforms or projects that you have coming up?
No, for now, the Instagram, Substack, Twitter, and buy the book and buy the next book. That's it.
Absolutely. All right, brother. Yeah. Thank you again. It's been an absolute honor to have you. Very excited to, see where the brand goes from here. And I'm sure we will be hearing from you at some point in the future.
Thank you for having me, Gabe.
Absolutely. One quick little addition, guys, before we close things out here. I sent a message to Simple Men asking, while I was going through the edit process here, if he had any recommendations for ascertaining whether or not a faceless account is legit. Because as you've probably heard, and as I said at the beginning, Simple Men is an awesome guy. He absolutely walks the walk. He practices what he preaches. But it's no secret that a lot of faceless accounts on here are very disingenuous, just looking to make a quick buck, or they're troll accounts or something like that. And so this is what he had to say with how you can gauge for yourself whether or not one of those accounts is legit. So give this a listen.
It's all about trying to get to know them a little bit better. So basically, when in doubt, like the content they post is the very top of the funnel. And it doesn't really tell you too much about who someone is, right? Because they can hide very easily. I would just see how they are when talking in the DMs, for example. Like there's so many supposedly Christian accounts, for example, and they're just assholes when people reach out to ask for something, for some advice or help or whatever. So I guess DMs and talking to the creator is a good way of knowing. And then also to keep an eye on how much they share of their actual life, to see if they actually practice what they preach would be something as well.
And that concludes episode 9 of the Operation Paragon podcast. You already heard where to find everything from him. Links are in the show notes if you're interested. And since the recording of that show, in the time between then and this release, he has also dropped his second book, Christian Vitality, which has been getting a lot of great reviews, so feel free to check that out as well. If that interests you, you can find that on his page with everything else. And as I've already said, I personally get a lot out of his content on the Substack, the email list, his page, and everything, so check it out if you want some valuable information from a guy who genuinely cares and has been doing it consistently for quite a while now. If you want to get in touch with me, you can DM Operation Paragon on Instagram or email operationparagonpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, remember that greatness is within your reach.